Welcome back, guys. It's your boy Z. Today here we have Mandy, the licensed group therapist. How are you today, Mandy?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, I wanted to first thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. I know you have a busy schedule. I know you have three little ones that take up a lot of your time. But today the topic is really why therapy should work or why you should at least try it to see if it works. And as a licensed group therapist, I thought you would be someone to really like look at because in a group setting, people might be more comfortable than a one-on-one exposing themselves to a stranger feel.
hmm
So why group therapy? Why did you decide group therapy was your gig?
So that's a really good question. I didn't actually know initially that group therapy was going to be my gig. I knew I wanted to be a therapist, and the opportunity came up as a group therapist that did not carry a caseload. So my only responsibility would be to facilitate group therapy. And I thought that was a great way to get into it. I really enjoy um, like facilitating conversations. I really enjoy that group dynamic feel in the room. And so it ended up being like, this is my gig. I really enjoy group therapy. I enjoy the opportunity to ask questions of people and see if they take the opportunity to share or not. And then what I do with that after they decide to share or not. It's kind of like, I don't know, it just became really fun. Um, and then on top of that, I started getting feedback that I was a really great group therapist. Like patients would say, "Oh, I'm so glad it's you." They'd be excited that I would come back, and they would say, "Oh, you're such a good therapist. I'm so glad that we have you." So I was just regularly getting feedback that I was doing a good job. So I think that was the other part of like, it felt really good and people were receiving it well. So that's how I got into group therapy.
All right. And so how does group therapy work? Like, is it like an AA meeting where it's like, hi, my name's Lindsay and I've been
Kind of,
therapy.
yes.
Okay.
So we do have a quick wraparound where we have everyone check in and we have specific check-in questions for them to answer. And then we get into whatever the topic is for the day. So typically we would introduce the type of modality that we're using. Um, if it's cognitive behavioral therapy, if it's acceptance and commitment therapy, if it's dialectical behavioral therapy. So each of the skills that we teach, we introduce the modality first, and then we get into why this skill is helpful, what things in our lives make it difficult to utilize these skills, because some of these things are really basic and a lot of people know them,
Hmm.
but it's the using part that gets them stumped. So what are the barriers to using these skills? So then we get into the skill and then we have them personalized.
Gotcha. Okay. What is your go-to modality and or skill that you like try to portray or show them that it works?
So for a year, I did acceptance and commitment therapy with adults, and that was amazing. I remember thinking, like, yes, this totally makes sense. And I really started to see it in how it plays out in my own life. And then I now work with adolescents, and that is definitely not the modality for them. They really kind of struggle to connect with that one. Um, so for them, it at least the population I'm working with now, dialectical behavioral therapy seems to really resonate with them. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, also resonates a little bit with them. So the majority of our skills that we do is dialectical behavioral therapy.
Okay. Um, and then because you are technically my counselor for, my wedding, when it came down to picking the types of I guess, quizzes and or assessments we should take to kind of figure out where to kind of like put your finger on for like the therapy for us.
Mhm.
Um, how did you go about like picking, you pick the love languages one and then you pick the 16 personalities one. So it's like, how
Yeah.
do you like, what's your process in picking like what's the right fit for quizzes?
That's a really good question. I don't know that the answer is so whatever, but I actually took the love languages quiz. I think the year after I got married, and my husband and I have used that as a base in our relationship when we're really kind of struggling to connect. That's our go-to, like, okay, I remember our love languages are these. This is how I can show myself some love right now. This is how I can show him some love right now. So it kind of always goes back to that
Okay.
when we're kind of struggling. So that's why I introduced that one first. Um, and then with the 16 personalities, being in a relationship is all about knowing who we are and what we have to offer to others. And so with 16 personalities and being in a relationship with somebody, it's super helpful to know what their strengths are, what things they struggle with, how these personality traits are going to look in our relationship, and recognizing that we're obviously not all the same person.
Mhm.
And it's not about trying to change someone to be more like us, because that would be super boring. It's about learning what that other person brings to the table and how can we use the strengths to better our relationship and or to build each other up when we're feeling down.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I feel that. That's a good one. Um, so what would be some advice would you give to people who are on the fence, or I would say against group therapy because, or I would say therapy in general because they don't see it
Mhm.
as a masculine thing to do. It's like to go receive help. Like, so like, how would you like for the gentleman out there, like get them to go or like get them to even attempt?
Oh goodness, that's hard. So, okay, I'll start with this. When when we were raised in our society in general, in the United States, it is not usually the first thing that families do is to talk about feelings and have language around that. We just all kind of deal with it in our own ways. And some of those ways are healthy and some of those ways are not so helpful. And depending on how we deal with our difficult and challenging emotions, and they're only difficult and challenging because we don't know what to do with them. Um, because we don't know what to do with them, we kind of just get into a groove, and that groove eventually doesn't serve us or our relationship anymore. And so we have to figure something out. And so there's a saying that's like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So typically, because we are creatures of habit as human beings, we're just going to keep doing the same thing, even though it may not be working. This is what we're used to, this is our habit. So therapy can help us be more open to responding in different ways, in ways that might be more helpful in our lives than what we had been doing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that is helpful for people to hear?
Yeah, because I mean, the way I took it was the whole creatures of habit, right?
Mhm.
Like for me, I know that my natural state of being is I get up, I plan, and then I go to sleep. Like that's kind of like how like the day goes. Um, and then if I don't necessarily build in time for self-care and or mental health checks or what you're talking about when it comes to like understanding what I don't know about myself, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Um, I think if I didn't consider those three things in why I should like kind of like surface, then like therapy would never like even come as an option because of how I'm running my life on a daily.
Hmm.
So yes, it does make sense.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Um, okay. So then when we talk about like what is appropriate for therapy, like would you say like it could be like the littlest thing where it's like it's a stress, or would you say like it has to be like more of an anxiety feel or a trauma? Like where do you draw your line with pushing people to try to go talk to someone?
I'm really glad you asked that because I think everyone in the world would benefit from therapy because a lot of times the thoughts that we have or the emotions that we feel, the things that we do, we don't think about them. We don't put a lot of thought, we don't reflect, we're not aware. And so sometimes talking about that is so freeing. There's especially with shame. Brene Brown is an amazing shame researcher who's written a ton of books and she's amazing. So she talks about how when we're in shame, the one way to overcome the shame is to tell our story. So like just say it out loud. Just that one step is can be so freeing. So obviously we don't want to share our story to everyone. Not everybody has the right to hear our story because not everyone we have that rapport with. We don't trust everyone. So it's got
Mhm.
to be somebody that will really be able to relate and empathize with our story. We don't want to share it with somebody who is just going to be like, oh, that's cool. That wouldn't be very helpful. We want to talk to somebody who's really going to understand how we felt when we tell that story. So that's why I think everybody in the world would benefit because we all have stories. We all have things that we struggle with. There is nobody that is not struggling with something. Everybody is human beings. This is life. So I never question why I'm struggling with things. I did it's a given. We're all going to struggle with something and it's helpful to talk about those things with people who can really understand.
Okay. On the side of mental health, right?
Mhm.
How do you see, people who necessarily aren't going to therapy, but using social media as an outlet for like a therapy room, where it's like they're kind of like shouting for help, but then it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily come out as oh they want help. It's more like they want attention. Like so, how do you see like social media playing a role in like the mental health aspect?
That's a good question. This isn't the first time that I've heard that. I heard that also last year. And when I heard it a year ago, I was like, what? That's even a thing? I didn't even know it was a thing. Um, so I haven't given it a ton of thought. When I initially heard that like this is a perception that people are using social media as like a way to get attention, the only thing that I can say is that likely, like all of our behaviors serve a need. There is a need not being met. So if somebody is using social media as kind of like a cry for help or a cry for attention, then likely they're not feeling that connection. They're maybe feeling lonely. They're maybe just really struggling with something and they don't have the resources or the support to get their needs met from people that they know, love, and trust. So, where else can they reach out to? Social media. Um, so it's not, I don't want to say that it's a bad thing because I think again it serves a need. And if they're willing to recognize that they need something, they may not recognize what the something is, but even if it's attention, it's something. And that, like, so all of our emotions are like data. It tells us something if we pay attention to it. So if somebody like me, which I'm not huge on social media, not that I don't like it, just I don't spend a lot of time going through it. So if somebody like me were to see a cry for attention like that, my instinct would be, Wow, it sounds like you're struggling with something. Is there anyone that you can talk to that you trust? So like I likely would like have them question like just to bring their own awareness. Do I have anybody to support me right now? Just having them think about that.
Okay. Because you touched on the emotions, we'll talk about EQ for a little bit. Um, so how does one begin to develop better EQ? Because like IQ is like one thing, like that's like the general knowledge and whatnot, like how smart you can be. But EQ is, I think, is probably more important or just as important because like if
Mhm.
you're emotionally detached or an emotional degenerate, like it makes you a certain type of way when it comes to like trying to handle situations, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's handling yourself, whether it's handling family. So how does
Mhm.
one improve their EQ, or how does one manipulate in a way that it's progressively getting better over time?
Awesome. So I would say plug for therapy. So again, the reason why I think everybody would benefit from therapy is to increase our awareness of ourselves. A lot of people have this idea that therapy is about somebody giving us advice about problems in our lives. And that's actually not what therapy is supposed to be about. Therapy is supposed to be about asking the person who is there receiving the therapy questions for them to reflect on their own, for them to come to their own conclusions, to solve their own problems. So, in terms of increasing our emotional intelligence, the very first step is awareness. And sometimes it takes somebody else asking us those questions for us to become aware. So we always have to start with ourselves first by looking inward. And so therapists, our job is to help others look inward. Does that make any sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay.
And so we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up. Do you have any closing remarks on why therapy works and why people should do it?
So I will just share that I have been in therapy for a number of years and different therapists. I've moved a lot. I've had different therapists. I've received different types of treatment. And I say treatment because of there's different, again, treatment modalities depending on what I needed help with in the moment. So I would say that it works because I know from my experience the things that I've seen improve in my life because of therapy. And it's not because it's like this magic wand and everything, it makes everything better. It has really increased my awareness of who I am, what I truly enjoy, what my values are, and how all of that kind of interacts with my roles in my life. So, as a mother, as a therapist, as a wife, as a homeowner, as a career woman, there's all of these things that are like pieces of our personality, things that we enjoy that if we don't start to think about how we are interacting with the world and people around us, we kind of get stuck and it's not fun. So, therapy at least helps us talk about the things that are going on in our lives so that we can process what's going on. We don't have um, a lot of people or society encouraging us to look inward at ourselves.
Mhm.
Like, yes, selfishness and materialism is a thing or are things, but therapy is about looking inward and learning who we are in our like truest, deepest sense of the words, who we are.
All right, awareness is key. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard this here first from Amanda, the group therapist. She, again, I want to thank you for coming onto the show. Did a wonderful job expressing, again, EQ, awareness, why people should, the reason why people are even afraid to even come here to sit down. And I want to thank you again for just coming on the show. It's your boy Z. We have Amanda, and we are out.
Thank you.